It was early 2006. Stephanie McMahon, daughter of the most powerful man in professional wrestling, sat across from her father in a corporate office. She was pregnant, glowing, terrified in the best possible way, expecting her first child with the man she loved. She had fought her own father for the right to be with that man. She had won life. For the first time in years, felt like it was finally hers. Then Vince McMahon opened his mouth, and what came out of it, what he proposed in that room to his pregnant daughter about her unborn grandchild, was so disturbing that it took nearly 2 decades for the world to fully understand what it meant. This is not just the story of the Vince McMahon incest storyline that never made it to air. This is the story of a warning sign, flashing, screaming, impossible to miss, that an entire industry looked at and chose to ignore. And that choice, it cost people everything. But here's what nobody asks, and I mean nobody: what was the first time Stephanie McMahon ever said no to her father? Because there was a first time. And when you hear what it was, the incest pitch starts to make a very different kind of sense. Stick with me, because we're going back to the very beginning. To understand why Vince McMahon walked into his pregnant daughter's office with an incest storyline in 2006, you have to understand what he built in the decade before that, and more importantly, how he built it. Vince McMahon did not just create a wrestling company, he created a machine that ran on content. And the most powerful fuel that machine ever discovered, the thing that sent ratings skyrocketing in the late 1990s, was his own family's real life. It started with the Attitude Era, arguably the most electrifying period in WWE history. Vince pioneered a creative strategy that blurred the line between his real family and their scripted characters. Shane McMahon, Linda McMahon, Stephanie McMahon. None of them were just family members. They were assets, characters, content delivery systems wrapped in blood relation. And it worked. Ratings exploded. Pay-per-view buys shattered records. WWE became a pop culture force. But here's the thing about machines. They don't have off switches. Once Vince discovered that exploiting his family's personal dynamics generated numbers, there was no ceiling. There was no line. If it generated ratings, it was justified. Every real emotion, every genuine relationship, every private milestone. All of it was, in Vince's view, raw material. Stephanie's initiation into this machine came in 1999. She was 22 years old. Her father scripted her as the innocent daughter kidnapped by the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness, dragged away, terrorized, used as a prop in a feud she had no creative control over. She said yes. Then came the scripted unconscious wedding to Triple H in late 1999. One of the most controversial angles in WWE history. Stephanie played the betrayed young woman, then the scheming co-conspirator. On screen, she was performing romantic chemistry with a man who was, at that time, entangled in a real-life relationship with someone else. Behind the cameras, genuine feelings were developing between them. She said yes to all of it. Linda McMahon was scripted into a storyline where she suffered a fake stroke from the stress of Vince's villainous behavior, spending weeks on national television in a wheelchair. Shane McMahon was beaten bloody by his own father at WrestleMania X7 in a brutal street fight. The entire family said yes, and Vince took note of every single yes. He cataloged them, banked them, and slowly, over the years, the ASCs got bigger. Drop a comment below. How many of you were watching Raw live during the Attitude Era and had nitrogen monoxide idea what was really happening behind those cameras? because what I'm about to tell you next changes everything you thought you knew about that era. The Vince McMahon incest storyline of 2006. It was not actually the most disturbing creative boundary Vince crossed. It was the most publicized one. But before that, before the pregnancy, before the pitch, there was something else. Something that gave the world the clearest possible signal of what Vince McMahon thought of the line between private life and content. When Stephanie McMahon and Triple H decided to get married, a real marriage, in a real church, on October 25, 2003, Vince McMahon proposed that the wedding be held inside a WWE arena. On pay-per-view for ratings, he wanted to broadcast his daughter's wedding to paying customers. That was the first time Stephanie McMahon ever said no to her father. And this is critically important because it reveals the escalation pattern. The wedding pitch was rejected. So Vince went back to the creative well. 3 years later, when Stephanie was pregnant, he didn't come back with something less invasive. He came back with something far more disturbing. He came back with incest. Each rejection didn't cool the obsession. It inflamed it. Early 2006, Stephanie McMahon is pregnant. This is not Kifbay. This is not a storyline. Her husband, Paul Triple H Levesque, is the father. They are a married couple, married since 2003, expecting their first daughter together. Vince McMahon walked into that room and pitched the following. His on-screen character would be revealed as the father of Stephanie's real baby. Not Triple H, not a storyline character. Vince, his character, the implication being broadcast on national television to millions of viewers, including children, that he had impregnated his own daughter. Stephanie did not just feel uncomfortable, she used a specific word when recounting this moment years later. She called it revolting. Not edgy, not controversial, revolting. She said, "It's completely disgusting, and I don't find the entertainment value in it at all. And he's actually my father. So how could I even play that out?" And she made it crystal clear why the physical performance was impossible. "I can't fake kiss my dad like we were in love or something." Now, most people think the story ends there. Vince pitched incest. Stephanie said no. End of chapter. But here's where things get truly dark. This is where the story takes a turn that most wrestling fans have never fully processed. Because when Stephanie rejected the pitch, Vince didn't apologize. He didn't reflect. He came back with version 2. And version 2 was actually worse. Version 2 did not remove the incest. It simply swapped Vince out for Shane McMahon, Stephanie's brother, as the on-screen father of the baby. The solution to an incest storyline with her father was an incest storyline with her brother. Stephanie killed that version too, but the significance of what just happened cannot be overstated. This was not a man who had an inappropriate idea and immediately recognized his error. This was a man who, when confronted with a moral boundary, looked for a technical workaround. The problem wasn't the concept of incest on his family's television program. The problem was merely which family member was involved. And almost 20 years later, in front of Netflix cameras, in what was supposed to be a career retrospective documentary, Vince McMahon recounted this story with the emotional weight of a man describing a scheduling conflict. His words, "One of my storyline ideas was that Stephanie gets pregnant, and I think I was the one to impregnate her, my character. I think it was something like that. Something like that." No remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing. No acknowledgement that this pitch to his pregnant daughter about her unborn grandchild crossed a line that most humans would never approach in the first place. There is another storyline. Vince McMahon greenlit in 2002, 4 years before the incest pregnancy pitch that has been largely forgotten. It is called the Katie Vick angle. In it, Triple H, ACC, CUSED, Kane of having a sexual relationship with a deceased woman named Katie Vick. Vince personally scripted a segment where Triple H wore a Kane mask and performed a simulated sexual act in a casket on live television. It aired on Raw. In 2002, Kane himself called it the most embarrassing moment of his career. Triple H has publicly described it as one of the worst things WWE ever put on television. Vince McMahon defended it. Here is what that timeline tells you. The Vince McMahon incest storyline in 2006 was not an aberration. It was a destination. A man who greenlit necrophilia content in 2002, who tried to monetize his daughter's real wedding in 2003, was always going to arrive at an incest pregnancy pitch in 2006. The trajectory was perfectly straight, and it pointed somewhere even darker. Here's the question that should make every wrestling fan deeply uncomfortable. If Vince McMahon had this inside his creative mind, if he thought incest involving his real pregnant daughter was viable television, what else did he think was acceptable? Because by 2006, the answer to that question was already being paid for in secret. Drop A in the comments if this is making you see the Attitude Era in a completely different light. The year the incest pregnancy pitch happened to 006 is the same year the first of over $12 million in secret. Hush money payments to at least 4 women began flowing from Vince McMahon's personal accounts. This was confirmed by WWE's own board investigation in 2022. The payments started in 2006. The incest pitch happened in 2006. That is not a coincidence. It is a portrait. By January 2024, the curtain had been ripped away entirely. Janel Grant, a former WWE paralegal, filed a federal lawsuit that detonated the wrestling world. The complaint accused Vince McMahon of sex trafficking, sexual assault, and systematic emotional abuse. It alleged that he used promises of career advancement to coerce sexual favors, that he shared explicit photographs of Grant with other WWE personnel and wrestlers, that she was orchestrated into encounters at WWE headquarters and assaulted by multiple men. Grant said she was used as a sexual pawn to secure business deals. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York had already been investigating. Federal agents executed a search warrant on Vince's personal phone. Grand jury subpoenas were served. John Laurinaitis, former WWE Executive Vice President of Talent Relations, was named as a co-defendant. This is the second secret your competitor's video glossed over. Laurinaitis was not just a witness. He was the man who for years controlled who got hired in WWE, who got pushed, who got fired, and who got contract extensions. As VP of Talent Relations, his fingerprints were on nearly every significant personnel decision the company made for over a decade. In May 2025, Laurinaitis reached a confidential settlement and agreed to cooperate against Vince McMahon and WWE. According to reporting, he is now providing evidence against his former boss, the man who managed the human resources infrastructure of WWE, who knew where every body was buried, who signed what, who was silenced, and why, is now talking. And here is what the SEX January 2025 settlement revealed on top of all of this. Vince McMahon had hidden 2 specific NDA payments from WWE's own financial filings, a $3 million payment to Janel Grant and a $7.5 million payment to another woman, meaning he was defrauding his own publicly traded companies. Shareholders, while simultaneously running the company's creative department, he paid a $400,000 civil penalty and reimbursed WWE $1.3 million. He settled without admitting or denying the findings. But here is what almost no video has covered. On February 19, 2026, just weeks ago, Janel Grant made her first public statement at a Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence briefing. And what she revealed sent shockwaves through even those who thought they had heard everything. She disclosed that the FBI has officially classified this case as a human trafficking investigation. Not sexual misconduct, not hush money, human trafficking. She disclosed that during the ordeal she had attempted suicide. She said, "And I want you to hear these words, by a series of miracles that I can't account for. I'm alive today." She also accused WWE of pressuring her to issue a joint statement claiming their relationship had been consensual, and the civil lawsuit, with an arbitration hearing set for June 2026, is still active. This is not over. Now go back to 2006. Go back to that office in Stamford, Connecticut. Go back to Vince McMahon sitting across from his pregnant daughter, floating an incest storyline with the same casual detachment he would later use to describe it on Netflix. The Vince McMahon incest storyline, pitch, was not a creative misfire by an eccentric genius who occasionally pushed too far. It was a data point in a behavioral profile, a profile that federal investigators, civil attorneys, and a grand jury have been assembling for years. The clue was always there. In 2006, in plain sight, and the industry looked at it, shook its head, called it peak Vince weirdness, and moved on. Did you know about the FBI human trafficking classification? Drop A, if this just completely reframed everything you thought you knew about this story. Share this video with someone who thinks the incest pitch was just Vince being Vince, because it was never just that. And yet, for all the darkness, there is something else that happened in 2026 that the wrestling world needs to hear. And it involves a 19-year-old girl who was born on July 24, 2006, the same year her grandfather pitched an incest storyline about her. Existence. Her name is Aurora Rose Levesque, according to Stephanie McMahon. Speaking in late 2025, Aurora is currently studying at Springfield College. She is pursuing her own path. And recently, she told her mother something that stopped Stephanie cold. She said, "Mom, I want your dad's job. I want to run WWE Creative." The granddaughter of the man who tried to turn her unborn existence into an incest storyline now wants to be the creative visionary of the company he built, not to exploit, not to monetize private pain, but to create. The generational reckoning is real, and it is only just beginning. What is the legacy of all of this? When Vince McMahon forced his way back onto the WWE board in January 2023, Stephanie McMahon walked out. She resigned as co-CEO and chairwoman. No dramatic press conference, no public war of words. She simply removed herself from the same corporate oxygen he breathed. Shane McMahon had already gone. Both children of the man who built this empire abandoned it rather than share it with him again. Triple H, the man Vince once tried to forbid his daughter from loving, now controls WWE's creative direction as Chief Content Officer, and the transformation he has overseen is the most powerful possible response to everything Vince represented. The shock value boundary obliterating approach is gone. Performer well-being is prioritized. A formal consensual relationships policy requiring disclosure of any workplace romantic relationships, specifically targeting power imbalance dynamics, was adopted in June 2023. A 24/7 reporting hotline was established. These were the guardrails that should have been there decades ago. The guardrails that might have stopped a man with unlimited creative authority and zero accountability from doing what Vince McMahon did for 30 years. And you can feel the impact of this shift right now in 2026. The difference between watching a Cody Rhodes promo in the current product and watching a Vincera Attitude Era segment is not just stylistic. It is the difference between a show made by someone who respects his audience and his performers, and a show made by someone who viewed both as instruments for personal gratification. Triple H said it himself, after surviving heart failure in 2021, with a clarity that only almost dying can give a person: "It doesn't compare to my passion for my kids or my wife." He learned the lesson that Vince McMahon never did. Family is not content. Family is not a storyline. Family is not a resource to be strip-mined for ratings. Family is the whole point. The Vince McMahon incest storyline pitch of 2006 was many things. It was revolting, as Stephanie said. It was a warning sign, as the subsequent investigations proved. It was a data point in a federal case, as the FBI's human trafficking classification has confirmed. But it was also the moment, the single moment, when one woman looked her father in the eye and said no. And in doing so, protected not just herself, not just her daughter, but the possibility that something better could eventually exist in the space he had poisoned. Aurora Rose Levesque is 19 years old. She's in college. She wants to run creative. The story isn't over. The best chapter may not have started yet. If this deep dive into one of the darkest and most important stories in wrestling history hit different for you today, if you learned something, felt something, or saw something you'd never seen connected before, then you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring that notification bell, because Ring Legends exists to tell the stories that deserve more than a headline, more than a hot take, more than a 5-minute breakdown. We go deep. We go real. We go where other channels won't. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think Aurora Rose will one day actually run WWE Creative? And do you think she'd be good at it? I genuinely want to know what you think. Next week, we're pulling back the curtain on another story that the mainstream wrestling media has never fully told. You are not going to want to miss it. Trust me on that. This channel is growing because wrestling fans like you want the truth, not just the highlight reel. Let's keep building this together. I'm the Legend Creator, and this is Ring Legends.